Since the fall of man, a war has raged between good and evil. Over the centuries, this war has distorted the truth. Now the truth is perceived as lies, and lies acknowledged as truth. To this day, the battle continues as we investigate and debate the truth behind the history and mystery of the universe. We are Paratruth Radio. We have all heard of the 1947 Roswell incident, in which a UFO crash-landed and left a debris field across the city. However, have you ever heard of the Aztec incident? Another UFO crash site, just a year after Roswell, leaves people in both shock and awe as they investigate a disc-shaped flying object that was much larger than its fallen sister.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Now Paratruth presents the Aztec UFO incident with special guests Scott and Suzanne Ramsey.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Eric.
And I'm Justin.
And you are listening to Paratruth Radio on the one and only Paratruth Radio Network. It's been a crazy week thus far.
Yeah.
It's been rough, but it's been good times too, you know? You can't have a good week unless there's a couple little
bumps in the
setbacks
road.
Here and there, you know. But path of least resistance. That's what I learned today. Take the path of least resistance and just do your best.
That usually works best.
Well, go ahead and jump into it because that's what we do. It's time for a show.
Yeah.
A brand new episode. We always love the brand new episodes. I hope everyone else does too. In the past, we have talked many times about aliens and UFOs. We've discussed whether or not they exist and what we truly believe they are.
Actually, one of our first couple episodes, believe it or not.
Yeah, absolutely. We did a series back then, if I'm not mistaken, a 3-show series or 3-episode series on the UFOs back then and aliens. And so over the last year and a half or so, Justin and I have talked about numerous things regarding aliens. We've discussed whether or not aliens are spiritual by nature, whether or not they're physical, they have a physical form of any kind, whether or not they're human. So you never know. Maybe there's humans out there somewhere. I don't know. Or if they're just simply all imaginary, and maybe what people are thinking they see isn't really there to begin with. But one incident that we've covered a ton is the 1947 Roswell crash.
Yeah.
But there is another crash that happened just a year later, and it's one that hasn't picked up as much as much news?
Hype?
As much hype? Yes, that works. One that just isn't, as well known as the 47 Roswell incident. And that is the 1948 Aztec UFO incident. This one also took place in New Mexico, which is really interesting. We have 2 crashes within 2 years, in the same state, which also, for me, and I'm sure this is something we can ask our guests as well, it's very intriguing, and it starts to make me believe maybe or possibly this whole UFO phenomena back then wasn't really alien spacecraft as we know it, but really is maybe just the military testing something, and they crashed twice, because it's just odd that it would happen in the same place twice, unless of course the military shot them down.
That's a good possibility too, which I've thought of, that maybe they were looking after the original UFO incident and trying to do something about it.
Yeah. I mean, we know that the military had changed their statement several times after the 47 Roswell crash, which is just, that in itself that pretty much answered the question for us, because they're just ridiculous. But regardless, This is about the Aztec UFO incident, and it's a very interesting story. Today we do have on two very special guests. Their name is Scott and Suzanne Ramsey, the authors of the Aztec UFO incident. Guys, girls, any animals that are listening, hey man, you never know. So you'll watch dogs and cats watch TV.
Yeah.
Maybe they listen to the radio too.
Or watch us on YouTube.
Yeah, you know. I mean, we watch them. Why not?
Right.
It would make sense. So, without further ado, we're going to go straight to the line with Scott and Suzanne Ramsey. Scott and Suzanne, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Before we get into the discussion about the book, I'd like to just give you both a moment to tell us a little bit about yourselves.
Okay.
I'm originally from Chicago and moved out to Lemon, South Dakota. Lived in Lemon for a better part of my life and have lived a variety of parts of the United States. I lived in New Mexico, Aztec, New Mexico, and that's where I met Scott. And oddly enough, my family, having lived in Lemon, South Dakota, when I was a small girl, somewhere my mom picked up a used copy of Frank Scully's book, Behind the Flying Saucers, which was about the Aztec UFO incident. And so I was familiar with it. And in fact, when my parents chose to move out of the cold weather of the north and to move to the south, they chose to move to Aztec, New Mexico, because my mom was so excited about the incident. We didn't interact a lot about UFOs and things on a daily basis, but that was something that she had read and thought, that seems like a really nice area. When we got to New Mexico, she was so disappointed because not many people talked about it, and not many people even wanted to admit that it happened, or they tried to just forget that it happened. And so that was kind of a hard thing for my mom to handle. She said, I'm so disappointed because I thought this was really an opportunity to be near something of this type of incident. I owned a business down there, and I had a radio show, and Scott came on my radio show, and that's how we initially met, and then worked on a Japanese film production about the Aztec incident, and that's how we got further acquainted. And now currently we live in Mooresville, North Carolina, and I own a all-natural root beer business, and we produce root beer. It's organic ingredients and pure cane sugar, and we distribute it to 5 states. And we live on Uncle Scott's root beer. I named it after my husband. He's always such a great team member, and I really appreciate his efforts. And we were in New Mexico, and my nieces had a chance to taste the root beer before we went into production, and they said, Uncle Scott, this is the best root beer we ever tasted. And I said, that's our name right there. So, and now we live, like I said, in Mooresville, North Carolina, and we have a small hobby farm and live out in the country.
Wow.
Cool.
Scott?
I've been in the electrical magnetic field all my life. We manufacture magnet wire, which is the winding wire of motors, generators, transformers, MRIs, CAT scan machines, maglev, high-speed transportation. Basically, we take copper and other alloys and insulate them for high temperature and high dielectrics, and we're a small company. We should basically ship anywhere in the world. And our plant is right in Charlotte, North Carolina, at the Charlotte Douglas Airport. It's called Express Wire Services.
All right. So you guys kind of talked about how you got interested in the Aztec incident. What prompted you guys to do more research and do the book for the incident?
Well, Scott came upon, that was my tasting with how I got to know about the incident, and then Scott was introduced to it in a different way.
Yeah, I was out in Farmington, New Mexico back in the late 80s. I was selling wire to a company out there that rewound big generators. And my first trip out there, we were out there testing a big generator late one Friday. And two gentlemen that were doing the test, local Navajo Indians from the local reservation. And I didn't know them, and I wasn't trying to stick my nose in their business, but I overheard them talking that it was Friday night, and the one said to the other, "Hey, what are you doing this weekend?" He said, "Well, I'm probably going out to Hart Canyon Road to look for a good place to hunt deer." And the other one said, "Well, whereabouts? Because maybe I'll meet you out there." He said, "Oh, out by the old crash site." And my ears perked up, and I said, "Old crash site? What old crash site?" And they said, "Oh, it's a old wives' tale, about late 40s, early 50s, a flying saucer crashed out there." Now, you know, the Aztec and the Four Corners area is up in the northwest corridor, Roswell's being in the southeast corridor. So I thought, there's no way these guys can have that confused. We're 8 hours away.
Right.
And after we tested the generator, I invited them over to the Holiday Inn for a nightcap to have a cold beer, and we sat there talking, and they're now very good friends of mine, by the way, but at the time we, you know, barely knew each other, and on a bar napkin they kind of drew me a map how to get out to this alleged crash site. And since I wasn't flying out till Monday, I had my rental car, and I thought I'd go out and try to find it. And they quickly warned me not to go out in a rental car too far out Hart Canyon Road. It's a very, very rugged road, very, very rough terrain. But I knew I was going to be back in about 6 weeks, so I kind of went out and got a lay of the land. And when I came back 6 weeks later, I got a 4-wheel drive from the local herds in Farmington, and pretty much found it. They gave me pretty good directions. Everything looks the same out there. I mean, one mesa looks like the other, but and the more I did some digging, the more I found people that said there was something to the story. And I always tell the story about 1/3 of the people said it definitely happened. Another third said they could care less. And the other third said it probably was just an old tale. But
that's probably the same statistics for today, even in that area.
And so, I just started digging, and the more I dug, the more I found, and that was 29 and a half years ago. And in 2012, Suzanne and Frank Thayer and Frank Warren and I put out the first book called The Aztec Incident, and that did very well. It actually sold out of the first production run. And in 2014, Career Press contacted us and said, if you have done more research and you have more information, we'd like you to do an expanded version or a new book. So we elected to do a new book, and this time it was Suzanne and Dr. Frank Thayer and myself, with the help of Bill Steinman and Mike Price. We went on to do as complete of a book as we can possibly put together at this point.
You had asked about what made us decide to get more to follow up and do research. I think initially Scott had some inklings, like he said, some people that did show that it was a possibility. And initially his statement was, I'll have this wrapped up in 6 months, find out if it's truth or not. And this is 29 and a half years later, and I'm not exaggerating. Just this last week, we got some additional information. So, ongoing. Since we've been married 13 years?
Going on 14.
13 years, and during that time, all but like 2 days on our honeymoon have we not worked on this. It is constant growth. We've got over 55,000, documents that are directly related and non-directly related. We've spent over $500,000 of our personal money, and we traveled 29 states. It is a fascinating story, and I'm happy to say that it's one of the few UFO stories where it's taken full circle. We actually track pre-sightings and things before the crash, the scientists that worked on it, equipment that was used and things on it, and then some of the fallout, and we're able to track the cover-up too. And so it's taken a lot of time, and I don't think many people would have the interest or the insanity to stick with one topic like we have. But it sure has been a fascinating tale.
Have you read the book yet?
I was able to get through some of it, yeah. And I mean, it's a vast knowledge of what you guys have researched, so it's a lot to take in.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did get to read through a little bit of it, and it's very fascinating. I mean, you always hear about the Roswell one, but as you guys put in the book, I mean, this was a very low played, almost non-existent account. So,
but much more better documented.
Right.
You guys watch the X-Files?
Oh yeah.
I didn't watch the new one, but I have watched the ones in the past. Yeah.
The opening one, the new one, Mulder actually mentions Aztec.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
About off the couch. Yeah, when he said that he's talking to Dana Scully, and he said something about Roswell, and he said there were others, especially Aztec and Kecksburg.
Yeah.
So I was kind of happy.
That was kind of fun.
The next day we sent Chris Carter a book.
Hey, it doesn't hurt.
Well, yeah.
Well, since Roswell was mentioned, the one thing I do want to ask you, since these two, both of these crashes happened within about a year of each other, how do you contrast the two, between Roswell and Aztec? Because I'm sure a lot of people, or at least some people, might wonder, like, what's the difference between the two?
Well, you have Roswell. You have two potential sites, Mac Brazel's ranch, what they call the debris field, and then the western track, which is out on the plains of San Augustine. There's some similarities, but really when you put it down in paper, which we do in the book, there's vast differences.
Plus the fact that I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Sorry, go ahead.
Plus the fact that the Aztec crash or landing was a full craft intact
right.
16 full bodies, whole bodies.
Okay.
So that itself, plus the witnesses, and one of them was a Baptist minister, county commissioner, two police officers. The initial one of the early men that saw it as it was traveling was a gentleman. He was a survivor of the Bataan Death March. So these are credible people, and plus we were able to find this last year. All this time we've tried, but we've never been able to get on the ranch. We were able to get on and find the location where it actually scrapes the bluff and causes sparks, and so some more physical evidence. So there are similarities, but it's a very different experience with the Aztec incident.
Mm-hmm. So before we go to our first break, I wanted to ask you guys, this saucer was huge. It was 100 feet in diameter. I can't remember if they really gave out any information about the Roswell one, but have you ever seen any other cases where they've found one intact and as large?
Not to my recollection.
Okay.
It's like the ones in reference to Roswell were like 30 or 40 feet in diameter.
Okay.
And there's 300-400 books written on Roswell, and
right.
But I think Stan Friedman is probably obviously the lead investigator on that case. We're talking 30, 40 feet. We're talking 2 to 4 bodies, a debris field scattered all over. This is 100 feet in diameter and virtually intact, except for a broken porthole, as the witnesses described. So now, when you really dig into it, that's the first thing I thought. Well, they're confusing this with Roswell, and boy, these towns really must be boring back in 48 or 6 and 48. You got 47 and 48. If you don't have a UFO crash in your town, you're nobody. But it's like Roswell, though. A lot of very credible people involved in the story. Mm-hmm. These don't involve. I hate to say this, but it's not like everybody we interviewed for the past 29 and a half years is the town drunk.
Right.
These are people that were very successful. As a matter of fact, Suzanne and Frank Thayer and I laugh. kind of under our breath sometimes how incredibly successful some of the witnesses to the crash became. And it was almost like, was there, and we say this kind of half joking, it was good for the bank account to see a flying saucer crash,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It was a lot of fun doing all the research. And when you also look at Roswell, Mac Brazel, it was pretty impoverished. I mean, he was a rancher living on the ranch. After his encounter with the Air Force, he was driving a brand new pickup truck. And if you ever go to Carrizozo, New Mexico, which is about an hour, maybe a little better from Roswell, at one point he had the largest meatpacking plant running in Carrizozo.
Cheese.
Wow.
Yeah, I think he did cheese too. So he went from a poor rancher with dusty blue jeans to owning one of the largest, if not largest, meatpacking plants in New Mexico.
Wow. Now, do you think that the reason some of these people became so wealthy, I'm sure part of it is that they've, written books or have gone out and done publicity things to talk about it. But do you think some of this wealth came from the military itself to try to keep them hush-hush about the situation?
I don't know that the publicity has helped them any. I think do you?
No, they never. I mean, after Mac Brazel was interviewed by the Air Force, there was very little publicity.
This is Roswell we're talking.
Yeah, and Aztec, none of these guys spoke until we went banging on their door, and they were all pretty elderly by the time we got to them.
They were they were threatened.
Yeah.
And so that was not something that they did. Nowadays we do publicity. You know what I mean?
Right.
We're in a different world. But keep in mind, this is 1948. You're in the Wild West of New Mexico. And not a lot of phones, not a lot of vehicles, not a lot of population. And it's still kind of that way if you've ever been down there. It's beautiful, just beautiful. But it hasn't changed a whole lot.
But it makes you kind of pause for a minute and say, well, as we're interviewing this 82-year-old person or 94-year-old person, and they obviously did very, very well in life, did they get some help along the way? That's sort of a little bit of a conspiracy theory, but the thought does cross your mind.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. All right, folks. We are talking to Scott and Suzanne Ramsey about their book, The Aztec UFO Incident. We will be right back after Eric's Random Fact of the Day.
Now, Eric's Random Fact of the Day.
Did you know that detonating a nuclear bomb in Utah is illegal? Obviously, this should be common sense, no matter where you are. However, according to Newscastic.com, Utah is just one of several states that have ridiculously silly laws. For example, if you throw a snowball in Provo, you can be fined up to $50. Another silly law is that it's illegal to dance in St. George. But perhaps one of my favorites is that it is illegal to fish while riding horseback.
This was Eric's Random Fact of the Day.
All right, folks. Welcome back to Paratruth Radio on the Paratruth Radio Network. My name is Justin.
And I'm Eric.
And we've been talking to Scott and Suzanne Ramsey about their book, The Aztec UFO Incident. Now, guys, we've kind of laid the brickwork here for this incident, so we wanted to get into a little bit about, what really happened. Did this UFO crash? Did it land? Let's hear all the gritty details here.
All right, the Reader's Digest version, starting even a few days before March 25th, 1948, which is the day that the craft was discovered up on the mesa. There's reports back and forth from Los Alamos National Laboratories, which is air miles, just over 100 miles from the crash site to Los Alamos. Suzanne and I were lucky to interview a gentleman, James Hardy. He was third in command of security for the Atomic Energy Commission. He arrived at Los Alamos January of 48, and he's kind of getting up there in years, but based on his memory, either February or March, they were having a lot of large lenticular disc UFOs flying over the lab, as well as green orbs, which were really common at Los Alamos. Even to the point one night they were called to the front gate about 2:30 in the morning, and a large, identical to what we described in the book, UFO hovering about 80 feet off the ground at the main gate. James told us that he actually requested permission to shoot at it. The request was denied, and after that he said they didn't get that close to the facility. They'd be off on the horizon or come over, within reasonable area to it. And James was a pretty good witness. He never read any of our books. He heard us on a radio show. We contacted him, and sorry, I have the hiccup. He was a very good interviewer, a very sober person, had a very good background, which was definable and verifiable. After that, we have other sightings down in Cuba, New Mexico, by two police officers, Andy Andrews, Highway Patrol, and Manuel Sandoval, that worked the pipeline during the day for security, that at night worked part-time for the Cuba City Police Department. Both were very good friends. They both patrolled Highway 44 basically together. Andy Andrews was really kind of out of his jurisdiction when he'd come down to Cuba. But he'd stop and meet Manuel for coffee and pie, and some nights their main conversation was discussing the UFO sightings. Step up to the early wee hours of March 25th, 1948, Manuel Sandoval decides that if he sees one and it's as low as he saw it the other night, he would chase it, see where it goes, see if it lands. That night, to his surprise, the one he sees, it looks like it's actually in trouble. It's wobbling back and forth. He follows it, loses it through the canyons on the way up to the Four Corners area. That's about a 100-mile run. And now we pause for a minute, and Valentin Archuleta, who Suzanne referred to earlier, a goat rancher who lives down in Blanco, had just returned from being a prisoner of war in the great, well-known and very sad Bataan March. He's getting his life back together just before 5 in the morning. He goes out to let his goats out in the pasture. Here's what he described as a sonic boom, and a UFO flying saucer, whatever, is in trouble, as he described it to Bill Steinman, and is wobbling and hits the mesa behind his ranch, and then continues absolutely due north, where it ended up on the canyon on the top of the mesa at Hart Canyon. Valentin runs down to the Blanco Mercantile building, which has a phone that the ranchers can access 24 hours. Takes 3 attempts. He calls the Air Force at Kirkland, tells them what happened. On the 3rd phone call, they took him serious and said, okay, where do you think it went? He said, it left my ranch heading north toward Hart Canyon. They said, great, thanks for the phone call. We'll get back to you. Never hears another word. Then we have Doug Nolan, an oil field worker, who shows up at his boss's house at wee hours in the morning. They both work for El Paso Oil Company. Bill Ferguson, his boss, says, our day has changed. We're going out to Hart Canyon. There's a brush fire out by our drip tanks. Of course, fire and drip tanks don't mix too well.
I would say not.
Yeah, they just removed them maybe 15 years ago. They were still there when I started. But they get out there. The other oil field workers that beat them out there said, hey, don't worry about the fire. It's way up on the mesa. But you need to go up there and see what's laying up there. And so they get up there and find this large, as they described it to me, lenticular disc. And the brush fire had nothing to do with the flying saucer at all. It looked to be like it was a lightning strike up on the western edge of the mesa. Anyway, at that point, other oil field workers show up. Manuel Sandoval shows up in his truck. The Cuba police officer, another police officer shows up. I won't go into all that detail. And then Solon Brown,
They climb around.
Yeah, they climb around on the craft. And then Solon Brown, who's a Baptist preacher from Mancos, Colorado, living in Aztec. Mancos is not that far. It's, Aztec basically is on the Colorado border for all practical purposes.
Okay.
And he shows up. He saw all the vehicles going out Hart Canyon Road, thinking that there was a oil field disaster. He goes out to see if he can help. And so again, like I say, you start pulling in. We have all these credible people, and later in the day, late in the morning, the military shows up and swears everybody to secrecy. Says what they're viewing is of national security. They're never going to talk about it again. The young oil field workers are anywhere from 19 up to 22. Bill Ferguson was probably in his 30s. Mr. and Mrs. Knight were probably in their 60s or 70s back in 48. And so you've got a mix of age range, which, we obviously, by the time we got to these oil field workers and whatnot, they were, getting up in age.
There was, too, if I could add, that while they were climbing around on the disc and looking at it, before the military got there, before the minister got there, the witnesses are crawling around on it, and it is a brushed silver 100-foot disc, about 18 foot tall. There are 3 stories, and they get close to it, crawling on it before they actually can see that there are portholes, and it's like mirrored sunglasses that cover it, so they couldn't see it. And there is the only problem, or the only issue on it, was a small hole about the size of a quarter, and one of the oil field workers runs down and grabs a pole. They poke it in there and poke around, and somehow they must hit a lever or something that releases the staircase that comes down. So they're able to look in, and they see 2 slumped bodies that are dead. And then later on, as other people go inside, there is a total of 16 bodies.
And then the story from there, as we follow the book, we follow through people that also researched it. Frank Scully being one. His first book came out in 1950, Behind the Flying Saucers. Richard Ogden wrote a book in 1960, although he never published it. We are fortunate enough to have a copy of the manuscript, and it was all about Aztec. 1980s, Bill Steinman's book, UFO Crash at Aztec, comes out. And 2013, Chris Evans has a book come out. Half the book is designated to Aztec. And then our book in 2012 and our new book in 2015. So there's over the years been a lot of activity on Aztec, not near as much as Roswell. But that's kind of what the book formulates, is all the history of it, and then we go into different aspects of what we've been able to prove.
In regards to these bodies that were found, did you ever find out what they did with them?
Oh, we'd love to know that. No, we have no idea. I mean, we have pretty good information where the craft went, only in reference to what Suzanne said earlier. Mm-hmm. We received a good tip from a retired person that was a civilian working at an Air Force base, and we've interviewed him for over 3 hours. He has some very good information about the saucer and some things that have never been published or written, things that he told us that are new.
So we still have to continue and document those, mm-hmm. but we've still got a ways to go on that. That's new information.
Right.
But the book is basically just a very in-depth, comprehensive study of the whole story of whether a flying saucer landed, crashed, whatever. I call it more of an emergency landing more than a crash, because by all accounts, it was virtually intact. But no, we'd love to know where the bodies went.
Okay. Right. So we're talking non-human bodies, just so we can be clear for our listeners, correct?
They were described 3.5, 4 feet, childlike in appearance.
Perfect teeth.
So that could be Eric. I mean,
hey.
Well, it's a reference that people describe, meaning they were they were more human than other descriptions. I mean, the perfect teeth thing is it was first mentioned in Scully's book, and it's been mentioned subsequently by others. More that these are more human than some of the other descriptions we've heard, seen, read about, and seen on Hollywood. Than
Eric, do you have perfect teeth?
No, I don't.
The reason I asked that is because me and Eric were kind of speculating at the beginning of the show before we got on the line with you that there's been numerous people say that these UFOs are man-made, that it could be extraterrestrials working with the U.S. government, and the typical description that we get of these things are the typical what they call gray species with the black eyes, the egg-shaped heads, and gray skin. So it's interesting to hear a little bit different description with the Aztec incident in particular.
It is interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think I've said over the years when people say, what did they look like? I've said typical aliens. And I haven't realized the evolution what Hollywood has done. They've made them almost look like insects.
Right.
We always try to differentiate what our witnesses told us and what other people have gone on record over the years. And really, it's consistent. They all describe them as childlike in appearance. So that's probably the way we describe it.
They had on blue suits, like jumpsuits. And they were all very similar in the fact that they didn't have any differentiation like a insignia or pulling rank or anything like that.
Wow.
And the bodies were charred.
Okay. Almost like there had been an inside explosion or something like that?
Decompression, some kind of superheat inside, don't know. I mean, we'd be really speculating. But everybody we talked to said they had been traumatized by heat, or what appeared to be heat.
The minister that came upon after the rest of the witnesses had gone, he came upon to see if he could help, and they showed him the bodies, and they asked him to say prayers over them. He ended up leaving after that and going back home, or going up to Memphis. He got there to the church, and he called some of his close parishioners, the people that he really considered friends, called him in and described what he had seen, and he was so shook up he was actually crying. And there was one person that we spoke to that was actually there at the time when that conversation took place, and said he was so shook up that he couldn't believe what he saw. It just And
his shaking up wasn't so much that it just destroyed his belief system, because he made that quite clear to the parishioners. Just shaken up that such a tragedy had happened, where there were all these deaths out in the middle of nowhere, and that these people obviously weren't from here, and how sad it was that this happened this far away from wherever their home was.
He really from a very kind, loving place. And actually, we found that with most of the witnesses, that was the case, that they were concerned when they went running over and they were climbing around and things. Again, keep in mind, this is 1948. We had one of the witnesses say that when a military helicopter came to the location, they were fascinated with it because helicopters had just been released to the public. And so they weren't sure which was more shocking to them, to see the craft or to see the helicopter. Well, clearly today we're very familiar with helicopters,
right.
But back then they weren't. So when they went running to the craft to try and look inside and try and help out, I'm sure there was fascination, but they were just worried that if it was one of ours, they wanted to help the beings, the people, out. And so it was really, I don't know, would you say, a rescue, kind of a rescue?
Yeah, these young oil field workers never immediately thought that this was an alien craft. Their gut was, my God, something experimental crashed up here, and we got to get these people out.
Oh, okay.
We're 1948. We're 3 years after World War II. And New Mexico was the breeding ground for experimental everything. I mean, by then, we're testing V-2 rockets that we brought back from Germany by 1948.
Right.
So until it really sunk in and the military showed up, they thought this was definitely a rescue mission to pull some servicemen out of a craft.
Mm-hmm. Well, now, through your research, and through the research that Justin and I have done on numerous so-called UFO incidents, as there are many around the world, it is said that the military has taken and reverse engineered some of the mechanics to help us build better aircraft and different weapon systems, stuff like that. Is there anything telling us, or any conspiracy telling us that they have found something interesting on this ship that has allowed us to progress in our own future endeavors, whether it be mechanical or otherwise?
I think something that's interesting, and it's a little sidebar to that, and then Scott, if you want to comment on that, I think something that's very interesting is the scientists that we were able to pinpoint that worked on the craft. Mm-hmm. One of the groups of scientists that worked on the craft went on to create GSI, and from GSI they created Texas Instruments.
Oh, wow.
So it's very interesting. I mean, these were world-class people that worked on it. And so, and we've just recently gotten some information on some other possible people that have worked on it, and we're tracking that now. But it's lots of things, as we've tracked, seem to have been tied into this. But do you want to go answer that?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. That's why the secrecy involved in any of these UFO, flying saucer, whatever. I hate using the word UFO with Aztec or Roswell because obviously they're identified now. They're flying saucers.
Right.
But I have a bad habit of saying the word UFO. Let's just assume for a minute all these things are 100% factual, which I believe. If you're the United States military and you stumble across one of these, you'd be crazy if you told the world you found it.
Yeah. Right.
And even, to use Stanton Friedman's old analogy, that if you gave Christopher Columbus a nuke sub, it would be meaningless to him. He couldn't replicate it. It would take years to be able to do that. And in Christopher Columbus's case, it was 600-700 years, whatever. In a case of a flying saucer, it could be 10 years, it could be 20, it could be 50, who knows? But the fact is, to cover it up like they did Roswell, and to, 8 months later you have Aztec happen, I think they were a lot better and had a lot of meetings after they put the front page of the Aztec or the Roswell paper and put it on the wire service that the U.S. Army recovers flying saucer, flying disc, or whatever the words were. And I think now 8 months later, we have a much more fine-tuned, well-oiled machine that says when one finds flying disc anywhere or shoots one down, we keep it a secret. We don't want anybody to know the technology in these things.
Some of those policies in emergency, what's the term I want to use? Some of those policies still stand in place.
Okay.
Well, you've got, I know which one you're trying to talk about. The fire departments all have a manual about what to do in different scenarios. There's actually a section of if they come across a down flying saucer, JPAC something or other.
Yeah.
John Greenwald has it on his Black Vault. And it's really funny. I've actually made bets with firemen, and they say you're crazy, and then they go look it up because they don't read those manuals.
Right.
Well, I mean, of course they read their manuals. You're certified firefighters, but they don't read all the what if stuff in the back. And sure enough,
fine print, yeah.
Yeah, the stuff that you say, well, that doesn't apply to me. And they still have that today. It's called call the Air Force, secure the area. Just like you read in all these crashes.
Right.
But I don't think at the beginning of the Cold War in 1948 the United States government. We just got done winning a war, bringing, close to 2,000 German scientists over here under the guise of Operation Paperclip, where they're working on several top secret projects. Of course, the missile program is the one that jumps up to everybody. You're not going to get on the phone and tell the world that, hey, we've recovered one of these.
Right.
My opinion,
Right. Well, one thing that you've mentioned a couple of times is Stan Friedman, and you mentioned in the book that you actually got to meet him. What was that like? Because, Stan Friedman's one of the, I guess you could call, leading experts in ufology right now. What was that like for you?
He actually wrote the foreword to our book.
Right.
And is a good friend.
He became a very good friend. Well, it's kind of funny, going back, late 90s up till 2000, 10 or 11, we were active with the Aztec Friends of the Library UFO symposium that they held every year. And I got involved because I was out there researching it. The library, at the time, Leanne Hathcock, was looking for a fundraiser to raise money to build a new library. And Leanne is a very forward thinker, and she decided to have a symposium with speakers come and talk about flying saucers on the anniversary date of Aztec.
Okay.
Now, I live here in North Carolina. I said, well, I'd like to be part of it. What could I do? So they put me and another guy, Randy Barnes, in charge of getting world-class speakers for this event. So I just picked up the phone one day, called Stan Friedman. I think we ended up talking for an hour and a half on the phone. Stan's a very, very wonderful person and will give you all the time you want. And he said, well, let me try to tie it in with another trip. And long story short, he talked at the University of New Mexico Wednesday and Thursday, did two lectures back to back. And then I flew into Albuquerque, picked him up, and had his undivided attention for about 3 hours from Albuquerque to Aztec.
Wow.
And he was not real big on the Aztec story.
He always calls it, he put Aztec in his gray box. And that's not quite sure, not yes, not no, but his gray box.
But, he asked me, well, what have you dug up on it? Well, in 3 hours, I told him, a good overview. And he said, well, I'd like to see the documentation to it. So when I got back to North Carolina, I shipped everything I had. And they did, we still do that. I mean, he had a copy of the manuscript of the book before it went to Career Press so he could, do the preface for it. The last book he did the foreword, this book he did the preface.
Oh, okay.
But now, he fully has accepted Aztec as a real event.
And actually has helped with some of the research.
Yeah, he's helped us with research, absolutely.
That's
he's a wonderful man, really.
Oh. Well, folks, we're going to run to another break here. We are currently talking with Scott and Suzanne Ramsey, but we will be right back. Stay tuned for Justin's Paranormal Headlines.
And now, Paratruth Radio's Paranormal Headlines.
What's going on, Parafans? Justin here with your Paranormal Headlines. These headlines are from the7tales.weebly.com. Werewolf captured on CCTV in Brazil. A possible hybrid werewolf has been photographed in a city near Mato Grosso do Sul in Brazil. The mystery creature, which was snapped by police CCTV cameras, appears to show a huge bipedal monster running down the main street in the city of Três Lagoas. The image, which was released by a city official, has been scrutinized by several forensic photography experts who state that the bizarre image is indeed authentic and is not the work of hoaxers. Vampires real? Video footage of man passing by a mirror without a reflection. Most of us have heard about ghosts and vampires. We see them in movies and read them in books, but many of us do not believe that ghosts and vampires exist in the real world. Many of us do not consider these as true and real because of lack of studies, research, experience, and evidence. Until now, people have diverse opinion on whether these exist or nothing but folklore. Some individuals claimed to have seen them, while lots of people never have encountered such. A video went viral when a man wearing black passed by a mirror without reflection. It was recorded in the CCTV footage of a flip-flop store in Savannah. The video was very clear, and all people that passed by the mirror visibly have reflections, except for this man in black. This video caught the attention of many people as to why he has no reflection at all. Many people find it scary. Several netizens in social media commented and said that the man could be a vampire in our contemporary world. From the stories and movies we have watched, vampires are believed to be immortals, afraid of sunlight, and they suck blood of people. There are assumptions about vampires that they don't have reflections on the mirror if they happen to accidentally face or pass by one. This perhaps is the reason why some people think this man is a vampire. Other people commented that maybe that this is just a hoax or an edited video to fool many unbelievers. And this has been Justin with your Paranormal Headlines.
This was a segment of Paratruth Radio's Paranormal Headlines.
What's up, folks? Welcome back to Paratruth Radio, part of the Paratruth Radio Network. My name is Eric.
And I'm Justin.
And we are speaking with Scott and Suzanne Ramsey, the authors of the Aztec UFO incident. Now, unfortunately, this is the most sad time of the entire episode. We have to say goodbye to our new friends. But before we let you go, Scott and Suzanne, we'd like to give you a moment to just tell everyone where they can find your book, if you have a website where they can find you, and how they can interact with you.
Well, there's a couple ways to get the book. You can buy it on Amazon.com. Barnes & Noble bookstores have it, or Barnes & Noble online. Or you can go to our website, which is www.theaztecincident.com. If you go there, you can, in the comments section, put down that you heard it on the Paratruth Radio, and the first one that does that, we'll throw in a 1 hour long DVD documentary on the Aztec incident, just as a little teaser. And also, by going to our website, you will get a signed copy from Suzanne and I.
If you want to purchase it. We're also on Facebook and Twitter, the Aztec UFO incident, and the book is available on Nook and Kindle too.
Oh, I forgot about that. You're right.
It's easy to forget the electronic readers.
Oh, I know, and I'm still learning how to do email. But I lost my train of thought now. It couldn't have been that important.
Oh, it was brilliant, I'm sure.
Smoke coming out.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much. It's really been a pleasure spending time with you, and wish you luck with the show, and thanks again for thinking of us.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for coming on, and thank you for offering that to our listeners, and we'll have to get you guys on again. It's been an interesting show for sure.
We'd love to.
All right, have a good night, guys.
All right, thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right, folks, that was Scott and Suzanne Ramsey, again, the authors of the Aztec UFO incident, which took place in 1948, a year after the Roswell incident. Very, very suspicious.
Yeah.
Great people.
Yeah.
It's really fun talking to them.
Very interesting to hear their description of the alien, or what their research said the alien looked at like. So it was
absolutely.
And what you guys don't hear when we were on our breaks. I mean, very funny people, very awesome people, as well as during the interview.
Mm-hmm.
So that wraps it up for the Aztec UFO incident, guys. There's the book again if you're watching us on YouTube. As Scott had mentioned, if you guys go to their website after hearing the show and type in the comments that you heard them on our show, they will send you an autographed copy of the book as well as a hour-long DVD on the Aztec incident. So definitely get there and do that. It would be awesome to know that you guys are very interested in our authors as much as we are. So that's about it for the Aztec incident. Next week, we are going to do one of my favorite topics, dragons. And, me and Eric have covered werewolves, vampires. Werewolves tops right up there for me with dragons. I mean, two intriguing creatures that are in mythology and folklore, but never documented bodies found, anything like that. So, that's all we got for you guys. Like I said, next week, dragons. Get to the Ramsey's website and get a copy of their book.
Yeah.
And any comments or concerns from you before we head out for the evening, sir?
You guys, the fans, are awesome.
Absolutely.
Simple as that.
I love getting the comments and messages from you guys. So if you have any comments, concerns, questions, you can email us at paratruthradio@gmail.com. Comment in the bottom section there if you're listening on Spreaker or YouTube. And as always, join us in chat 8 p.m. Sundays every Sunday, and interact with us and other listeners as well. So that's all we got, guys. So until next week, when we will see you same time, same channel. My name is Justin.
And I'm Eric. Peace. If you enjoyed this episode of Paratruth Radio, and you would like to listen to it again, or are interested in listening to any of our past episodes, then you can listen to them on HD at our website, paratruthradio.com.
And you can also find us at Stitcher, Blueberry, TuneIn, iTunes, Spreaker, and YouTube.
And of course, like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter for brand new updates of our show every day.